Hi, everybody that's out there spectating and watching. Come on, anybody that's just rolling in, and we'll keep going. Thanks for coming out to the meetup. Tonight, we're going to talk about why businesses fail with technology. And also, as you probably know, most of you signed up, this is a new kind of meetup in Austin, so we're totally acceptable for anybody else that would like to present, do things, talk about stuff, anything else. If you've got a topic or something you're interested in, let me know. I'll help coordinate, getting us together with space, doing stuff and everything. I think there's a lot of groups in Austin that talk about business, and there's a lot of groups in Austin that talk about technology. And sometimes you get into good discussions at the business one about technology, and sometimes you get into good discussions about business and technology one. I wanted someplace where we could do those things together, because frankly, clearly from the tagline, technology is a business, and that's, what I've been doing for a really long time, is, helping those two things come together and work on stuff. I'm Jay Williams. I'm the Chief Architect of Williams Technology Group, which for all intents and purposes is me, and a few friends. But we basically help companies figure out, how to make money using technology in their business. And so I've been doing that for a long time in lots of places. Some folks here have been with me through various places of those things before, and a lot of new people I've just met. So welcome, thanks for coming out. I've got Mike Roberts with us, who's actually going to give us the first quick demonstration on failure and talk about demonstration. Actually, so far, the last time that he gave a presentation, it was clearly a demonstration of failure because the power went out, the lights went out, everything else as soon as he was trying to present. So we're going to hopefully not recreate quite that environment this evening. Although that presentation was also on failure. And he'll be happy to tell you about the Dionysium and all that stuff later too. You could put in a shameless plug, anytime that you want to. Because that's another great organization in town that does all kinds of fun stuff. So without further ado, I give you Mike, who is currently the Chief Data Scientist at at Social Matters. And he has been lots of things, chiefly a rocket scientist among, lots of things, worked for Disney, the list is endless. He can tell you all those things. He's one of the most brilliant guys I know. And Mike, you're up.
Thank you.
Did the wave for you back here.
Yeah. Good evening, folks. I am Michael Roberts. I have worked at a few places and had a few experiences in the software business. So I thought I would share some thoughts with you on that business. How many people here have ever gone to the Dionysium or heard of the Dionysium? Nobody. One? Okay.
Heard.
Yeah, so it's a quarterly show. It's and then this guy right here. It's a quarterly show that myself and a few other folks put on, and it's basically sort of a variety show for nerds. So we have a topic that we'll talk about. We'll have 3 or 4 speakers on that topic. The highlight of the night is a debate related to the topic, and then we finish it off with a cartoon. And the presentation you're about to see is actually a presentation that I did for the Dionysium a couple of years ago on architecture. Now, it's aimed predominantly at a lay audience, but we'll get into maybe a little bit more detail here because I assume we've got some experienced folks.
How many people are here from the business side?
As opposed.
How many people are here from the technology side? Busiest. Cool. So, you've got, a balance.
A mix. Yeah, so we're going to talk about software architecture, about its history, about what it is, its similarities and differences to conventional architecture, and about its role in failure. So let's begin. So startups generally don't fail because they code the thing wrong. They fail because they code the wrong thing. And that process of learning to code the right thing is the process of architecting your software. This is Fred Brooks from IBM. Now, Fred's famous for a couple of things. One of them is the IBM 360, which was really the first computing platform where you had an ecosystem of hardware and software and peripherals that all worked together and lasted over a long period of time and evolved over time. Before that, it was sort of one-off systems. Everything was custom. And you were locked into a particular thing. Once you bought it, when you couldn't use it anymore, you bought something completely different. The other thing Fred's famous for is a rather depressing book called The Mythical Man Month, which many of you may have heard of, some of you may have read, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Fred said that one of the most important technical decisions that he ever made on the 360 project was the decision to go from 6-bit bytes to 8-bit bytes. Because that meant that the platform could support lowercase letters. And because it was IBM, everybody followed them, and they all supported lowercase letters in the 8-bit byte, which we have to this day. So you can thank Fred that all your tweets don't look like this. Right. So, architecture. Classically defined as the art or practice of designing and constructing buildings. Now, obviously, software architecture doesn't fit into that strict definition, but if you look at the process, if you look at what a software architect does, they're very similar processes, right? So an architect goes in and gathers the stakeholders and integrates those differing points of view into a set of documents, and in particular, a set of visualizations that everyone can understand, so they reach common ground, right? And in the traditional architecture world, those meetings are called a charrette. In the software world, those meetings are called a meeting. So traditional architecture gets style points in that regard. So looking at the similarities, there are a lot of diagrams in both software architecture and traditional architecture, and they serve that same purpose, right? They're there to provide a visualization that everyone can understand, because when two people talk about something, when you're just talking about it verbally, it's very easy to be agreeing and be talking about something that's completely different, right? I mean, how many people have had that experience where you walked away from a conversation thinking you agreed, and then the next day you find out you were talking about something completely different. There was a misunderstanding there. And visualizing helps to mitigate that. It doesn't eliminate it, but it helps to mitigate it. So software architecture and traditional architecture are similar in that regard. Now, some people suggest that software, the process of creating software is similar to the process of music composition, right? So here's Gershwin composing at the piano. And here's local composer Graham Reynolds decomposing a piano. Everyone has their own style of work, I guess. Now, both software and music, the end product is a series of symbols that you play over and over again. So in that regard, they're similar. But whereas in music, the objective is purely aesthetic, in software, it's heavily utilitarian, right? The music that we play has to do something in the end. It can't just sound beautiful. Now, there is a small portion of the software world that's devoted to purely aesthetics and entertainment. But the vast majority of projects are utilitarian, more like construction. So what about aesthetics in software? So a building architect takes into account the surroundings, the context that the building's going to be in, the impression that the client wants to make with the building, things like this. And it's out in public. For the most part, buildings are out in public. They're something that a lot of people see. For many companies, they're very representative of their brand. Software, on the other hand, runs mostly hidden inside machines. Now, there might be interfaces to it, but the vast majority of code is not code that ever directly results in a visualization, right? Now, a lot of programmers, myself included, do find aesthetic beauty in code. There is such a thing as beautiful code, but that doesn't really come into play at the level of software architecture.
Can you just give me an example of what you might think is beautiful code versus, my boss is a coder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he loves it. And if I would love to know what the difference is between normal code and beautiful code.
Yeah, so I can give you my own impression of beautiful code. If you see code that has a lot of branches in it, if statements,
Yep.
and it makes it very hard to follow, right? That code can generally be replaced with, say, a more functional combination of functional and object-oriented styles, right? So you're not branching there on the page, you're branching sort of into the, you see what I mean? Into the object hierarchy.
Yeah.
And when you see code like that, it's beautiful. It's like a little haiku. Because every piece, when you're looking at it, it's a layer, it's like a layer cake. And each layer is understandable. Every piece of code you're looking at fits on a page. It's clearly understandable what it does. And when you want to find out what the details are, you just go to the next piece of code, right? You traverse the hierarchy that way. Whereas ugly code is just sort of all splattered there on the page. Spaghetti code.
Like a bad retrofit.
Yeah, and there are also patterns in code, right? So if you're using good design patterns, as they're called, there's an elegance to how you bolt those patterns together. Because, to the point Mike was making, if you've got all these branches running all over the place, that's one thing. But when you see an elegantly connected, set of patterns that are all performing their initial tasks, it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm going to be extreme here, ballet, in the sense that each of those components is performing the task that it needs to, and they're doing it elegantly and handing off to the other people effectively, and those kind of things. And so that's where some of the elegance, comes into code too.
If I could jump in my own little opinion on this matter, just to explain it, and I think of it as minimalism, right? That there's a lot of ways to write code to do the same thing, but there's a minimal amount of code that you can write that will be understandable to the programmer, anybody programmer who sees it, as well as implement a solution that is not superfluous. And I think that in coding especially, if you can do less versus more in terms of the coding to accomplish the same thing, they usually favor less. They favor the minimal solution. Yeah.
And we, as programmers, have to strike a balance too, because sometimes code that looks beautiful may not be as performant for our particular task. And so we compromise. Just like an architect compromises when he has to work with a material that won't do exactly what he needs it to be able to do, right? So there's a compromise on that level. But like I say, this whole idea of aesthetic comes more from the programmer's sense of craft than it does from a customer. A customer's never going to tell you, I want your code to be beautiful. It's pretty rare. They want their site to work. They want, no complaints from their customers. So this is Google's building, and this is their website. I think there's a pretty stark contrast there that gives you an idea of the role of aesthetics in those two areas. Okay, so now, stepping back a little bit.
Michael, they spent a lot of money updating the font for that logo. You should be using the new font.
Yeah, I thought about that. I was like, and I got to take a screenshot, paste it in. So much work. Chapter 2, I work with monkeys. So visualize, if you will, a monkey that only understands 3 commands. He says, take another banana, move a banana, or eat a banana. That's it. Now imagine that you have to implement a complex mathematical algorithm just by communicating with that monkey. Welcome to the world of computer programming. So this is the ENIAC up in the upper left, which is widely regarded as the first real computer. And that's an Altair 8800, which some of you may actually remember.
Yeah.
I'm from that era, a couple of years back. Which is one of the first personal computers that you just go and get and bring home. It's amazing. It's a wonder. But you notice in both these cases, there are no screens, there are no keyboards, there are no mice. So how do you think they program these guys? Anybody want to venture a guess?
Dip switches?
They flip switches. So after a while, getting a repetitive stress injury, flipping switches on the ENIAC, they came up with higher level languages. This way you could talk to the computer in a more or less human readable form, and then you would have another program that would take that language and convert it into the language that the computer understood, commonly called machine language. But even machine language is a higher level language than the ENIAC guys were using. So now we can sort of see the big picture here and how architecture flows down. So you start with your business requirements, your constraints, cost, time, and you convert that into these diagrams, right? These visualizations, this set of documentation that then gets translated into code that can then be compiled for a monkey. So it isn't necessarily all that different from building architecture. You've got a set of drawings that gets turned into work orders that can be implemented by primates. Chapter 3. Fail. So this is a building collapse in Shanghai. It's not really so much a collapse as it is just kind of a falling over. And it's surprising to us precisely because buildings don't usually do that, right? We're not used to seeing buildings
Brand new ones.
that just fall over. And this wasn't an earthquake or anything. This was just a mistake. This building just literally fell over because its foundation wasn't correct. Now imagine if that happened, not just very rarely, but like 1 in 7 times. Okay? Well, then you'd be in the software business. Okay, so the statistics are kind of dismal. 15% of the projects are outright failures. Over half of them are just screwed up. And in a survey, 75% of IT professionals said that their projects were usually or always doomed from the start. This is a grim business that we're in, right? Where failure is so pervasive. I do see some experience in the room, so I'm curious, how many people either know of or have been directly involved in a large software project where you know that more than $1 million was spent and that code never got used? Yeah, okay, so like a third of the group. It's a bad business. And where it happens is at the beginning, because like I said, these people often know that they're doomed from the start. Now, I'm going to digress a little bit to some history. Back after World War II, project management became a thing. Before that, it really wasn't. Like, people didn't talk about project management. Project management really grew out of World War II, the processes that were developed. And out of that came our sort of traditional waterfall process for developing things. Like the Lockheed, Skunk Works, those guys, NASA, they all started that and then elaborated on it. And the idea behind that is that if you completely specify what you're doing and you reduce it down to all its components and you build those components and then you integrate them back up, then you can't possibly fail. And when we started applying this to the software world, this is what we got, this massive failure. And people knew that something was wrong, right? They knew that this wasn't an aberration, it was what usually happened, which isn't a good thing. And I liken the waterfall in terms of software to making a 50-foot putt, right? You don't know the lie of the green, and you're sitting there and you swing, and you're just hoping that it's going to go right in the cup. And if that's your plan, you're doomed to failure. Then no wonder 75% would say you're doomed to failure, right? Because it's not going to happen. You know, for even an excellent golfer, it's not going to happen. You can hope, but you should really plan for a contingency. And that's where agile development sort of came into play, right? The idea was that we would take this aberration, the fact that things change, and that we learn what at the beginning of the project we didn't know, and we'd incorporate that into the process so that even if it doesn't necessarily change how long it takes to actually do the thing, at least we're doing it in a conscious way so that we can prepare everybody else for what's coming, right? We can bring everyone along. Because what would happen in traditional management is that you'd miss that putt and everyone would freak out. I mean, the whole thing would be this complete disaster. Agile means that you can miss like a series of short putts. And by doing so, you can refine your estimates and manage expectations. It's as much about that as it is about anything else. There's a famous Chinese saying, when the emperor asked them to go back to the drawing board on estimating the project, came back and said, well, we've changed the estimate. We have not changed the cost of building it. And that's sort of what Agile attempts to take into account. The biggest mistake, though, that I see that people make in Agile, and I'm going to wrap this up shortly, is that they don't fully embrace it in an architecture sense. They embrace it in a software component sense. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you've got a project that involves maybe 3 or 4 big components that all have to work together. So we got this one talking to that one, maybe they got a database over here, and this one talks to this one, and that one talks to that one. So we got these components, especially nowadays where we're into this era of microservices. We build a bunch of services so that we can deploy them in a scalable fashion across the cloud. What typically will happen, even in an Agile environment, is that people will look at this and they'll start breaking down the components and they'll apply Agile to each component in turn. And the result is that you don't necessarily get all the benefits from Agile, but the idea behind Agile and continuous integration is that you are continuously delivering. And what people tend to do is they tend to get tunnel vision. They say, well, I am delivering. I'm delivering component A. And then I'm delivering component B. And then I'm delivering component C. But if you have these interactions between these components, then that's not that different from the waterfall where you had, do component A, do component B, do component C, integrate them all at the end. And so even though you're being Agile on this particular piece, and you're managing those changes within that context, you're not doing it in the broader context of your system. So let's say that you're developing a new software as a service, and it has these components. What I would tell you to do is to think of your product as software as a service. And the very first thing you should do is not start working on component A, but delivering a service that does nothing. The Seinfeld of services, right? You do like a hello world, but have it do the basic things, just the essence of the things that you need. You need to have customer sign up. You need to have invoicing. You need to have a dashboard. You need to have all this basic stuff. And you'll find that there's so much work doing even a minimal version of all those things that even your app that does nothing is actually going to be a challenge. A lot of people, they get an idea for a particular thing and they think that the challenge is the thing. the service that we have to build, the core technology. And I'm not saying that you don't do that, because you can still take, if you have like a high-risk technology development, something that's going to be a long pole in your tent, you could still be doing that in parallel. But continuous delivery means continuous delivery of your whole system. It doesn't mean delivering it piece by piece by piece. So I would urge you to step back when you're doing a project that does involve a lot of pieces that are in the end going to have to work together, and think about doing just the simplest, most rudimentary version of each of those. Even if it uses like canned data, just to have that experience of seeing the whole thing work from the very beginning in some very rudimentary way. Because a lot of the interactions, there'll be complex interactions between even very simple components.
This concept you're discussing, the architectural dimension of agility versus a functional view,
Yeah.
would you consider doing a longer discussion like this on that? I, for one, would very much like to hear you go to a deeper level and give some practical.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's coming.
It's a valid point. I've seen it. It's very interesting, and it's hard to understand because there are different dimensions.
Yeah,
I personally would find it beneficial. So
Great. If you November 30th, you want to calendar, right here. Seriously, it's our next meetup, and yeah, actually, we'll include some of that in the discussion. So you'll see as I go through my slides.
like
So,
lines. Thank you.
good.
That's delivery, and right there. Yep.
So I told you we'd get back to the Mythical Man Month, and I figured it was a good way to sort of wrap the thing up. How many people have read the Mythical Man Month? Okay, a few of us in here. If you're in the software business, in any role, you should read the Mythical Man. Because the essence of that book and his experience with the IBM 360 and other projects at IBM really does speak to today just as much as it did then. There really is a timeless aspect to that book. He's a brilliant guy. But if you really want the condensed version, you can kind of get it from this Dilbert cartoon. Because you can't have an IT presentation without a Dilbert cartoon. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell, right? If you add people, you lengthen your schedule. But people are not a fungible asset. Thank you for your attention. I hope that was worthwhile. Are there any questions?
More questions at the end. Thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
My first thought, so I guess not to self-promote, but I work for a software product development company, and my role is director of product there. And so we develop software for other companies. And one of the things that my role there is to look at the product from a holistic perspective. And when a customer comes to me and says they want to build X, I usually I'm personally trying to talk them out of certain things because I don't think it's a good idea for them. I mean, granted, we'll get paid more, but at the end of the day, if they run out of money, it's not a good thing for them. And if their project fails, it's definitely not a good thing for any of us. So I try to look at it from a product perspective. I almost am starting to map that onto what you've done. You're looking at it from a software architectural perspective, but from a product perspective, if I come up with a minimum viable product for them, what you're saying, and actually it's quite helpful, is to think of it like, how can I build an MVP that not only is an MVP from a product standpoint, but also an MVP from an architectural standpoint? How can we build enough of that framework out that we can begin evaluating that performance early on, as well as the product that they can take and go back to their customers with.
And it's an art.
It is.
I mean, because you got these components here, and you have to kind of pick out the essence that makes that component, right? Sort of the essence of the functionality there.
Yeah.
So that you take enough away that you're not drowning in details from the beginning, but you leave enough there that it's still recognizably doing what it needs to do in the overall system.
Can you make a comment on the user interface that Google uses, which is pretty genius in a lot of ways because it is that simple, versus, I remember when it first came out compared to the Yahoo homepage that you remember, Yahoo homepage was busy. And here was this really elegant, simple solution. But if you look at the technology model and the business model behind it, it's pretty complex.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing about it is that the interface hasn't evolved, but the smarts behind it have. And I think one of the reasons that they've been able to keep that interface, because really that interface is 20 years old, because Alta Vista had that same interface.
I was going to say that wasn't the first, yeah.
It's a search box, right? I mean, that's been around forever. But what the genius behind what Google's been able to do is to make that so intelligent behind the scenes to suggest things and to know the context for your search, because you've made 10 other searches there, so they have some idea now what area you mean. I can't remember what it was, but I did a search the other day, and I just sort of did it without thinking, because I've been thinking about a topic, and you write that like one word, then it's related to that topic. And Google came up with an answer that was absolutely right on point, and I'm like, how the hell did it do that? Because I was looking at the word, I'm like, that 99% of the population wouldn't, but see, it knows my search history.
Right. It knows you like fluffy bananas.
Yeah.
And so it immediately came back with, yellow cars.
Yeah, I mean, so they've been that. I think that interface is not going to last forever, but they have certainly pushed it. I think as far as
It'll die when the text box dies.
Well, they've continued it. They're continuing it onto the phone with those cards ideas, right? The fact that it knows a history about you, and therefore when you're asking a question or you're doing something contextual, it figures it. So they're pushing that one-line interface into the fact that you don't even have to ask now.
Exactly.
It's just relevant information based on where you're at.
All right, then I'm going to
Thanks. We'll have more questions time at the end, and we can mingle.
You want me to run?
Would you mind? So we got a lot of technology there, so I'm stuck with the business side. So luckily we'll have some fun talking about it. So I call this the 5 Deadly Sins talk for a couple of reasons. How many people here have ever done something wrong when you knew it was wrong? Come on now, I want to see it. Really? Come on, I see people that have done it, Roy. Don't even go there. I have evidence. Okay, so evidence. I have evidence. So, I think, we all have that thing to where we always would like to do right, but sometimes circumstances and sometimes preference, and sometimes just poor judgment, drive us to do things maybe even we know we shouldn't. So that's why I called these the 5 Deadly Sins, because I'm not going to tell you anything that you probably don't inherently know about technology and business, but I'm going to remind you about why we shouldn't do some of those things and, what we've learned over time in terms of doing things right. Can you give me the next one? Oh, shit. Can you? Oh. How many people know what this is?
Please tell me that's your slide.
I couldn't resist, because I find myself with Windows 10 missing my BSOD so I could go get coffee. So, I figured that I won't get a lot of chance because everybody keeps getting younger and younger and younger than me. So I won't get to use this slide very much more. But this to me, you want to talk about failure in business? This is the ultimate example of failure in business. What is Microsoft's business? Software. Let's just be generic and say software. It contracts, but let's just say it's about licensing and it's software. But assuming it's software, what does that mean? Well, it means at the very least, no matter what it does, it has to run. Okay? I just have a very low bar here. Okay? It has to at least run. How many people have ever gotten a screen in the room? Anybody here that doesn't use Windows? I'm just checking. But seriously, to me, this is the ultimate failure. If I were in charge of Microsoft and I got this once, I would be pissed. Getting all of my users knowing that every user that's ever used my software has seen this, I would be ashamed. And so to me, that's a huge failure.
And the monopoly finally ran out with the phone, and that's why nobody wants a Windows phone.
Yeah. Well,
that right there is the number one reason that they don't have a shot at phones.
Yeah. It's a TI fellow speaking, so you can write that down. Next. Number 1, and these are not really in priority order, but they're sort of in priority order because, there's some things we don't like to talk about. So I figured I'd put those up right front. First of all, religion. I can tell you, we all do this, and there's a whole room full of people doing it right across the way from us right this minute. they're having religious discussions about Ruby. And frankly, I didn't actually know they were going to be across the room when I put Ruby in here. But Ruby is one of those polarizing kind of discussions. For those that don't know, it's one of the current vogue programming languages out there, which we could go through and talk about C, C++, Java, blah, blah, every other one of those. They're always religious folks. They're religious folks about platforms. They're religious folks about software as a service. There's religious folks about just about everything in technology. And dedication is good, and religion is not bad as long as you realize there are other religions in the world, and that your company might need to know something about some of those other ones, particularly as it does things like acquisitions or mergers or, you know, waking up and seeing the rest of the world actually exists. And so if you get very focused on your religion, it could be a huge detriment to your business. And I can show you business after business after business after business that decided. In fact, Bill Gates got up in front of the third World Wide Web conference in Boston and stood in front of all 300 of the folks out there that were responsible for putting together what we now call the internet and the web. And he said, "Thank you all for coming. You can all go home because the Microsoft network is rolling out next week." I'm not joking. Exactly what he said. I can assure you that the response was not one that Bill Gates was used to in that particular. In fact, he had his security guards escort him off the stage before Larry Wall rushed the stage to take him down. For those of you who don't know, it's the inventor of Perl, and there's a long story there. But anyway, the other part about religion is when you go and buy your development as a business, when you get your developers, teams, CTOs, whether you know it or not, you just adopted someone else's religion. So a lot of people don't understand that, especially folks on the business side. You know, when you start talking to people about coming in and doing your development, putting those things together, you know, ask them about how they feel about religion. And then go find somebody else that's of another religion, put them both in the same room together for 5 minutes. I trust you will find out very quickly whether or not you've got someone that thinks inside the box or outside the box. And if they're inside the box, be prepared to pay the price as you go forward. Ignorance. Now, in a lot of ways, business people think they can be forgiven. They say this all the time. In fact, I think probably 4 times today I've heard this. "Oh, I'm a business person, I don't know anything about technology." How many people here are business people that don't know anything about technology? Thank God, none of you came. Good. The fact is that, you know, Roger knows, how many of those people were in this building earlier today, would you say?
Oh, I thought.
Yeah, a fairly large percentage, let's put it that way. It's no excuse anymore. I hear you, okay, you know, when you were seeing the guy from IBM on the screen, perfectly acceptable, right? Arcane science, guys in white coats, weird stuff going on in the back room, fine. Is there anybody here that doesn't use technology from dawn to dusk in this room? Seriously, of course not. We use it in every part of our life on a constant basis. Yeah, I mean, you just, the phone, we just keep going, you know. Our cars, when was the last time anybody here actually worked on your car that was invented after 2010? Anybody? It's impossible. You can't work on your car. It's hopeless. Yeah, okay, you're weird. But, you know, that's because it's not working. You had to take Uber here. Just kidding. So the fact is that, you know, you can get off to a fat start thinking about doing what you know and all those kind of things, get a quick prototype together, do those things, but staying ignorant about the role of technology in your business is not acceptable from the business side anymore. You've got to get educated about what it means, what kind of technology choices you're making, you know, and what you're doing for the future. Because otherwise, you're going to get 6 months down the road and you're going to be in trouble. I can't tell you how many companies, even startups, big companies, small companies, et cetera, that I talk to all the time are in trouble because of technology decisions they made because they were ignorant. You never see the bullet that kills you. So ignorance is not bliss. Next. Trust. Trust is a big deal, right? I mean, I got to tell you, I talk to lots and lots of people that I say, "How'd you make that decision?" And they go, "Well, I trust my guys. I trust my guys. I hired my guys. I trust my guys. My guys are great. I trust them." I'm like, "What are they doing?" "I don't know. I trust them." Okay, you know, if you gave somebody responsibility for your bank account, right? And you come in one day and say, "How much money's in my bank account?" And they go, $1. what happened to all the money? And they said, well, you trusted me, right? That's going to be a problem, right? People doing their business with their technology all the time. Microsoft's a perfect example, right? I can't tell you, when we went through the whole phase of, well, you can't get fired if you buy IBM, and then we went to, you can't get fired if you buy Microsoft, and now we're at, you can't get fired if you do everything in SaaS. The fact is, you can always, whether you get fired or not is not important. Whether the company survives is important. And if you don't have some form of independent verification, if you don't talk to people about what they did before, how it works, even when you're talking to vendors, right? I know people that make decisions on their accounting system based on what they heard from somebody else. I like QuickBooks, it's cool. Oh, let's use QuickBooks. Oh, no, FreshBooks. Let's use FreshBooks. I like it. Well, how? I mean, seriously, an entire company, an entire company decisions get made that way. What are you using for project management this week? I like Asana. No, Trello. Okay, Trello, let's go with Trello. Does it do what you need to do? I don't know what the feature set is, but it's good. Somebody said it's good. I saw a guy using it, So anyway, especially CEOs, I know it's intimidating, right? I know it's intimidating to try and override your developers because they're strong-willed and they have things, but always ask them the business reasons for what they're doing, not the technical reasons. As Mike pointed out earlier, there are always literally thousands of technical ways to solve problems, lots of different things to do. Make sure you're clear in communicating the business-related things to folks.
I've seen a corollary or the antithesis of that many times, where you don't trust your people, and the business manager is constantly second-guessing him, not knowing what he's talking about. He doesn't trust his people, and it's like, well, why do you have these people here if you don't trust them?
So the answer is all of these play off of each other, right? When you've got an ignorant business manager, that's when you usually see the lack of trust, because they're incapable of validating whether or not that's going on their own.
These guys are just having a good time.
They've been burned
just
before.
Trying to spend his money.
My favorite thing is, you go in and all the guys are playing foosball. You're the business manager. You're like, we're shipping a product tomorrow. Let me just tell you, if you're shipping a product tomorrow and you walk in and all your developers are playing foosball, one of two things has happened. One, somebody's got a whole new job and you're getting bought out and you don't know you're the CEO anymore. That's number one. Two, well, there's three. Two, somebody's found some really good drugs and they're all on it. Or three, the product's ready to ship, it's 100%, their job is done, and they're doing whatever they need to do to blow off steam after working for 2 weeks all night to get all that stuff done. I'd always rather see the latter, But that's a matter, again, of ignorance. If you're a business person and you don't understand that agile process and continuous delivery and the things that Mike just talked about, you're ignorant. And there's no school, by the way, bad news, there's no class in the MBA program that says learn agile development. Let me just tell you that right now. And so, if you want to find out about those things, you're going to have to stretch. You're going to have to find somebody that knows. You have to go somewhere that you can learn and see that in practice. Now, that's one great thing about the place here. You want to see agile development in practice at 40 different companies, I can take you through it in 3 hours. I can show you 40 different companies, all doing agile differently, different stages, different kinds, different ways, and you can experience for yourself. I call them safaris. So, any CEOs that need to go on safari, happy to do it. Next slide. Spend. This is the killer of all killers. And from a developer standpoint, developers don't even, ask a developer if they balance their checkbook, right? Probably not, it can't be the most expensive thing in your line item, but I'll tell you, and you could probably justify this, I would say, for example, certainly Capital Factory, most of the companies here's largest line item, in their startup budgets are development. They're pouring it into it left and right. If that's the case, you probably got a problem in your business plan. And certainly it's probably incomplete. Second, I know lots of other people that come in and go, oh, we're going to do all that with SaaS, as if that's some kind of magical, magic wand, and there's a line item that says SaaS 10%. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we're not really a technology business. That's usually what they'll say when they do that. So that goes back to the ignorance slide. The other thing, if you spend your whole life at your business talking about things like the app or the platform or the technology or all that stuff, just stop. Just shut the company down. Go take your money, go do something else. If you don't talk about things every day, and I mean your developers in what they're thinking about, if you don't talk about the customer or profit, not revenue, not revenue. I say not revenue like 5 times, nobody ever hears me. It's always like, well, how much revenue do you guys have? I don't care how much revenue you have. Are you making any money, right? Then, it's all over. And my last one on here, I should have made the fonts bigger. Sorry, I'll publish this so everybody can get to it. Don't forget about the spend or it'll kill you very fast. Or in some cases, and we could all name lots of big companies, it'll kill you very slowly as investors just keep pouring money and more money and more money. Carl will give us some real world examples frequently, but he's still under NDA. But, that'll kill you almost worse. It's kind of worse. It's like having a long lingering disease that just won't, kill you fast enough. The last one, the big one, the one that, we don't talk about because we're supposed to be the people that have the answers, is change. And, the silent killer of all things is technology and change. It's change. Anything in technology is going to be killed by change. Whatever you think is the hottest, greatest, we could go through example after example after example. I could show you speeches. I love YouTube sometimes because you can actually go see stuff that people said, John's not here, but I actually have a copy of a speech from Java 1, where people are talking about, the future of Java conquering the earth and, bringing, food to other nations and, solving world peace and all the other things that it's supposed to do. Do you know who gave that speech? This guy named Scott McNeely. Anybody seen him lately? I don't know. Scott? Yeah. I have a big leather jacket, I wear it around that he gave me. That's my remnant of, Scott McNeely and this other company called Sun Microsystems. Some of you might have heard of it too. We could go through the graveyard of companies, left and right. But I could tell people that bet their entire careers on those companies, bet their entire careers on that technology, bet everything, on those kind of things. We do it all the time. So I put this great book up. It's by Lynn White Jr. There's a couple of other books that I really like. The interesting thing about this book, you can't get it on Kindle, sorry. So you'll have to actually find a hard copy version of it. But it's all about medieval technology and social change. Most people don't understand this is not new. I'm not telling you anything that, people didn't talk about. In fact, people in 999 were sure that it was done, right? In 999, all over the world, everyone in multiple cultures said, well, we're done. Of course, everybody that counted that way, to be clear, right? There were other cultures that didn't count quite the same way that the West did. But everybody in the West that counted that, they just knew it was over, Very similar to what happened in 1999. For those of us that went through that whole process, I could just imagine the monks, at Lindisfarne, basically, 2 weeks before saying, why bother to, bring in any crops? Why bother to copy another manuscript? Why bother to do any of those things anymore? So change is a constant. If you're not building for change, again, to Mike's point, that he was making the stuff, then you're not designing and, doing your architecture, and all those things are important. Because everything that we build today is going to change. That's one constant. The building, you can kind of go, well, this building's life is 50 years, right? So we're going to build all the right materials, and it's going to stand here, and it's going to have floors. Yeah, we'll move the internal partitions around, but the shell, the hull, all the pieces, it's going to stand for a long time. Do you guys build anything this morning, and it's still alive and running without you touching it 12 months from now? Come see me. I want to give you some money. Because I'll tell you now, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at all. Next slide. That's me. I'm downstairs on 7. I'm around. I love talking about all this stuff. I help companies figure out how to do all the stuff that Mike was talking about and how to fix and do business things. One more. Since I had to have my Dilbert cartoon as well, you can't really read this one. It's who needs training to keep up with technology trends? You're fired. I only want people who already know how to do their jobs. I didn't see that coming. They don't have a class for that. So non-driven development, how to succeed with technology in business. That's November 30th. Tomorrow I'll send out invites, post all that stuff up and put it together. If you like Mike, you can have Mike back. Maybe you can beg him again to come back, and we can keep talking about this. Thanks everybody for coming, and I'm hanging around, and I'm going to have a beer now, and we'll look forward to talking to all of y'all. Thanks a lot.